Former Secretary of State and Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton sat for a closed-door deposition about Jeffrey Epstein this week, in which Republicans unfortunately derailed the deposition by leaking photos of Clinton to social media influencer Benny Johnson on the outside. After the deposition resumed, Clinton was asked questions about UFO conspiracy theories and Pizzagate, the QAnon conspiracy theory. At the same time, she punted a lot of questions to her husband, former President Bill Clinton, who is set to testify today. This Republican led committee says it's trying to get answers about the Epstein case, but the reality is that it's a lot more politically partisan and intended to embarrass Democrats, while Republicans like Donald Trump are equally, if not more so, implicated in the exact same files. My name is Kat Tenbarge. I'm an independent journalist partnering with Courier, and you can read more of my reporting at spitfirenews.com. For obvious reasons, Bill and Hillary Clinton have been the enemies of the Trump administration for a long time. But Bill Clinton, in particular, is a key figure in the Epstein files and was pictured in numerous photographs in the newly released Epstein files. There have been disturbing photos like these released, which include redactions over women's faces. And famously, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime partner, was spotted in the background of Chelsea Clinton's wedding photos. The Clintons are far from the only people to be mentioned in the Epstein files and to be broadly more implicated in the scandal, but Republicans are hyper fixating on them, especially as opposed to President Donald Trump, who was mentioned thousands upon thousands of times in the Epstein files. This has led the Clintons to characterize this as something of a partisan witch hunt while coming out guns blazing ahead of their testimony this week. Hillary Clinton published her opening statement to the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee on X. It received over 2.5 million views, according to X's built-in counter, as well as over 36,000 likes. And this is a pretty long opening statement, but let's skim it for the most important parts. Hillary Clinton opens this statement by saying, "Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee. As a former senator, I have respect for legislative oversight, and I expect its exercise, as do the American people, to be principled and fearless in pursuit of truth and accountability. As we all know, however, too often congressional investigations are partisan political theater, which is an abdication of duty and an insult to the American people. The committee justified its subpoena to me based on its assumption that I have information regarding the investigations into the criminal activities of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me be clear as I can. I do not. As I stated in my sworn declaration on January 13th, I have no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that. Like every decent person, I've been horrified by what we have learned about their crimes. It's unfathomable that Mr. Epstein initially got a slap on the wrist in 2008, which allowed him to continue his predatory practices for another decade. Mr. Chairman, your investigation is supposed to be assessing the federal government's handling of the investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and his crimes. You subpoenaed 8 law enforcement officials, all of whom ran the Department of Justice or directed the FBI when Epstein's crimes were investigated and prosecuted. Of those 8, only 1 appeared before the committee. 5 of the 6 former attorneys general were allowed to submit brief statements stating they had no information to provide. You have held 0 public hearings, refused to allow the media to attend them, including today, despite espousing the need for transparency on dozens of occasions. You have made little effort to call the people who show up most prominently in the Epstein files. And when you did, not a single Republican member showed up for Les Wexner's deposition." She then went on to say, "This institutional failure is designed to protect one political party and one public official, rather than to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors, as well as the public who also want to get to the bottom of this matter. My heart breaks for the survivors, and I am furious on their behalf." Then she goes on to say, "A committee endeavoring to stopping human trafficking would seek to understand what specific steps are needed to fix a system that allowed Epstein to get away with his crimes in 2008. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all of the files." It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of heinous crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. It would demand testimony from prosecutors in Florida and New York about why they gave Epstein a sweetheart deal and chose not to pursue others who may have been implicated. It would demand that Secretary Rubio and Attorney General Bondi testify about why this administration is abandoning survivors and playing into the hands of traffickers. And then she ended on the note, but that's not happening. Instead, you have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation, in order to distract attention from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files. If the majority was serious, it would not waste time on fishing expeditions. There is too much that needs to be done. What is being held back? Who is being protected? And why the cover up? So, I would argue that this is a pretty well written statement that does identify a lot of what the government has failed to do in investigating Epstein and a lot of what's holding back victims and survivors from getting the truth and the public from also getting the truth and ensuring that accountability takes place. At the same time, it is a completely valid process to have Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton testify about their involvement, considering that there was clearly a connection, certainly between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, but also given Maxwell's presence at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, also likely a further connection there that needs to be explored. So while Hillary Clinton is saying a lot of the right things here, and it's undeniably true that this has become a politicized partisan mess that does nothing to help victims and survivors and actually retaliates against them for seeking justice, it's also true that she should be answering questions. Unfortunately, the Republicans asking her those questions are clearly not up for the task. And that could not be illustrated more by the leak that happened almost immediately into this closed door testimony. Shortly after Hillary Clinton's closed door deposition began, conservative influencer Benny Johnson tweeted a picture from inside that closed door deposition. And he wrote, "Breaking, the first image of Hillary Clinton testifying under oath about Jeffrey Epstein to the Republican Oversight Committee. This is the first time Hillary has had to answer real questions about Epstein. Clinton does not look happy. Photo provided by Representative Lauren Boebert." And as we scroll down here, you have a picture of Hillary Clinton taken from inside this testimony. And no, she doesn't look happy, but she also doesn't know a picture is being taken of her in this moment. And we have no context as to what's being said that could influence her facial expression here. It's also funny that Benny Johnson puts his logo over this photo. And then, as a follow up, he includes another photo, this time covered in his logo, that says Representative Boebert's name tag showing where the photo is being taken from. And it says full shot of the Clinton Epstein testimony currently ongoing. Now, shortly after Benny Johnson posted these photos on X, Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles posted the following. An advisor to the Clintons just came to the press cams and said today's deposition has been paused after Representative Lauren Boebert sent an unauthorized photo of Secretary Clinton to conservative influencer Benny Johnson. And Johnson responded, "This is insane. The deposition is being filmed. Hillary wanted it to be done live on TV. The entire deposition will be released soon. Representative Boebert gave me permission to post photo with credit. Hillary is trying to get out of answering questions about Epstein because of a pic." No, Benny Johnson, she's not trying to get out of answering questions. As she explained later, if Republicans are willing to break the rules they already agreed on, then what other rules are they willing to break? They resumed the deposition shortly after. They just took a pause because one of their own members flagrantly violated a rule they had just agreed upon. And Benny Johnson, just because he got permission, doesn't mean he's allowed to post such unauthorized photos. It's so clear through this incident that Republicans are using this as a partisan exercise to smear Hillary Clinton before she even gets to answer any questions about her involvement with Epstein. And that is the heart of the problem that she talks about in her opening statement. Even if she needs to be held accountable, that doesn't erase the fact that Republicans are only interested in holding Democrats accountable because it benefits them personally and politically. They're not interested in truth and justice for all. They're only interested in getting a leg up over their political opponents. And that is not justice. That does not help the victims and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. That only helps these conservative influencers and their political allies. Also, it's true that Hillary Clinton asked for this deposition to take place live because she says she has nothing to hide and she wants there to be as much transparency throughout this process as possible. This is what she said to reporters immediately afterward.
Well, I have just finished testifying. I answered every one of their questions as fully as I could based on what I knew. And what I knew is what I said in my statement this morning. I never met Jeffrey Epstein, never had any connection or communication with him. I knew Ghislaine Maxwell casually as an acquaintance. But whatever they asked me, I did my very best to respond. It was disappointing that they refused to hold a public hearing, so I wouldn't have to be out here characterizing it for you. You could have seen it for yourself. We had asked for that. We think it would have been better for the committee and its efforts to gather whatever information they are seeking. We had a bit of a challenge in the beginning because we had agreed upon rules based on the fact it was going to be a closed hearing at their demand. And one of the members violated that rule, which was very upsetting because it suggested that they might violate other of our agreements. So we had to cease the hearing for a period of time until we could get assurances that no rules would be broken going forward. And we returned to answer questions repetitively, literally over and over again. I don't know how many times I had to say I did not know Jeffrey Epstein. I never went to his island. I never went to his homes. I never went to his offices. So it's on the record numerous times. It then got, at the end, quite unusual because I started being asked about UFOs and a series of questions about Pizzagate, one of the most vile, bogus conspiracy theories that was propagated on the internet that was serving as the basis of a member's questions to me.
Wow. So, a couple of things worth noting there. One, Hillary Clinton does acknowledge that she had this sort of casual relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. And I do absolutely think that that is worth probing and is perhaps not as lighthearted as she's making it out to be here. But at the same time, clearly the Republicans on this committee are not capable of actually doing their jobs. Lauren Boebert leaking the photo is just one example of that. You also have these questions about UFOs and Pizzagate. It is an insult to the American people to be basing this line of questioning, which is so critical to obtaining accountability and justice in the Epstein case, to be using a conspiracy theory that is absolutely outrageous on its face and has also been repeatedly disproven and has also escalated into real world violence. Using that as the basis for your questions is horrifying. It's disqualifying. And it goes to show that these Republicans are simply incapable of doing the right thing here. So even if Hillary Clinton does have something to hide, it's clear that these Republicans are not going to be able to get to the bottom of that. But apart from those Republican flubs, something that is really interesting about the way that Hillary Clinton testified during this deposition is that she pushed off a lot of knowledge and responsibility on to Bill Clinton, repeatedly saying, "You'll have to ask my husband," in response to questions according to Politico. Specifically, Politico reports that the way Hillary Clinton answered questions during her 6-hour deposition raises the stakes for these Republicans to, quote, pry revelations out of Bill Clinton when he sits for his deposition on Friday. Oversight Chair James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, told reporters, quote, the number of times that she said, I don't know, you'll have to ask my husband, was more than a dozen. But at the same time, we have to remember that James Comer has also claimed that Donald Trump is exonerated by the Epstein files when we know that's not the case. And we don't even have all of the files regarding allegations against Donald Trump. So Comer isn't exactly an unbiased source here. He's extremely loyal to Donald Trump and has gone out of his way, abdicating his responsibility and his duty to try to excuse and deflect from Donald Trump. Nonetheless, Bill Clinton does need to be questioned about his extensive association with Jeffrey Epstein. It's just so frustrating that these are the people tasked with doing that. The Politico article goes on to say Republican Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania also told reporters that any specific questions about the Clinton Global Initiative and the relationship the Clintons might have had with Epstein and Maxwell, who is currently in prison, could only be answered by Bill Clinton. Neither of the Clintons have been accused of misconduct. Bill Clinton has maintained he was an acquaintance of Epstein's, but stopped communicating with him at least a decade before his arrest in 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges. His spokesperson also posted on social media in 2019 that Bill Clinton traveled on Epstein's plane 4 times internationally in 2002 and 2003, though Secret Service details were present, quote, on every leg of the trip. But, Politico goes on to report, Republicans are eager to make Bill Clinton their boogeyman, seizing on images of him posing with Epstein and unidentified women that are part of the files released by the Justice Department. I also think it's very interesting that they're bringing in Hillary Clinton for 6 hours of deposition when Melania Trump has yet to face really any investigation for her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Here she is in a famous picture with both Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't even think there are any pictures of Hillary Clinton with either Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. We know that she was an acquaintance with Maxwell, but so was Melania. Clearly, she looks very comfortable here next to both of them. Why don't we bring Melania in for a 6-hour deposition about her association with Epstein and Maxwell? That would be fair. That would be somewhat nonpartisan, but it seems like Republicans aren't even interested in touching the question of Melania's relationship with Trump and Epstein. Now, this CNN panel of journalists and commentators is sort of highlighting that, not the hypocrisy regarding Melania, but rather the fact that for decades, Hillary Clinton has been asked to answer to questions involving her husband.
Opening statement that she is going to give behind closed doors to the committee. And it says in part, quote, I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island home or offices. I have nothing to add to that. Now, her husband, Bill Clinton, will testify tomorrow before this same committee. Unlike his wife, he has many documented ties to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. My panel is here now to discuss this. Nia?
Listen, Republicans have long been obsessed with Hillary Clinton. This is just the latest chapter of it. If you think about what the Epstein conspiracy theories were among Republicans and sort of QAnon and conservatives, it was always this idea that it was Democrats who had, most involvement with Epstein. And so this is kind of part of that. It's ridiculous in so many ways that Hillary Clinton is there, given that she's never met Jeffrey Epstein. There are many more, much more powerful men who did meet and consort with Jeffrey Epstein, Howard Lutnick being one of them. So it is quite ridiculous, I think, that she is being called to testify today. She wanted to be out in public before an audience so that Americans could see sort of the ridiculousness of this, I think. That's not happening. It's happening behind closed doors. But yeah, I mean, this certainly feels like an attempt to humiliate and embarrass her, which has been sort of what Republicans have always wanted to do, and sort of bring her down and bring her down to size. And so, we'll see what comes out of it. More interesting, obviously, tomorrow. Bill Clinton did have contacts with Epstein, like a lot of other powerful men. But we'll see what happens out of this today.
I want to sort of pick up on one of the points you were making about people who, her husband is one thing, Bill Clinton, and he is going to talk tomorrow, but others who are not being called by this committee. And that's one of the many things that Hillary Clinton points out in this statement, this opening statement, which is almost 4 pages long. And, there is explanation and then there is offense. This is part of where she goes on offense. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files.
That comment right there is part of the reason I think you saw some Democrats in Congress actually vote with Republicans to basically agree to have the Clintons actually testify here. It's because when you have this effort by the Dems saying, we want transparency here, we want to hold everyone accountable, including the Trump administration. Well, now, you're not giving, by having the Clintons also testify here, you're not giving Republicans the chance to say, okay, well, you want transparency and accountability for some officials, but you won't put other officials up. Now you have the Clintons actually testifying, which means you can add even more fuel to these calls for, various powerful figures, including those in the administration, to actually commit to transparency here. You got the people that you wanted, essentially, to talk. Well, now, you're not going to have as many excuses if you're the Trump administration when you face even more calls to have others that you're politically allied with to actually also be transparent.
And on that note, I'm going to read another quote from this opening statement that we just got from Hillary Clinton that she's giving behind closed doors. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all files. It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would get to the bottom of reports that the DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of heinous crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. There, a reference to Elon Musk at the end.
I mean, the Epstein files are such a target-rich environment for accountability in this country, and you're starting to see that around the world, right? And yet, Hillary Clinton is going to spend probably upwards of 5+ hours today. It's hard to predict exactly how long she's going to be in there, answering questions that she really doesn't have any answers to. And if this were a real investigation, time would be running out, right? I mean, there are statute of limitations on some of these crimes. There are questions about whether or not they have pursued everything diligently. And this is, in some ways, wasted time. Obviously, Republicans want to talk to Hillary Clinton. They have wanted to talk to her on a myriad of political issues over the course of the last several decades. This is their opportunity, and yet it is on an issue that she has literally nothing to do with. Her name does appear in the files largely because she was running for president, and it's news links to those articles.
Yeah, and it is apparently true that Ghislaine Maxwell was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. I was told this morning that they think that she was a +1. She came with somebody who was actually invited, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was at Clinton Global Initiative events and seems to have been involved in it beforehand. So she's going to be asked about that. Neither she nor her husband, former president, wanted to do anything like this. They said, if you want us to testify, we'll do so in public. And that, of course, was the tug of war. And it was the fact that Democrats broke on the question of whether they should be held in contempt. Only 3 broke on the issue of Hillary Clinton, 9 on the question of Bill Clinton, that they just said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this in private. On the question of why she is being called, if she actually never even met, she said, Epstein. Andy Carney has a story in the New York Times this morning on this whole question of Hillary Clinton having to answer for her husband's behavior for Hillary Clinton's entire adult life, and certainly Bill Clinton's entire political life, which is Hillary Clinton's entire adult life. And he quotes Patty Solis Doyle, who was a longtime aide to Hillary Clinton, including in the Senate. For almost the entirety of her married life, she has had to answer questions about her husband's actions. She has supported him throughout. There is no reason for her to have to suffer this last indignity. She has nothing to do with it. It's infuriating. I mean, look, she is somebody who has so many titles and has done so much on the national stage, on the international stage, being elected and Senate confirmed. This is an example of her getting sucked back into Bill Clinton's world, and not that.
Yeah, and we all remember, the Stand By Your Man interview that she did when he was running for president in 1992. You fast forward to her candidacy for the White House in 2016, and Donald Trump having the press conference with some of Bill Clinton's accusers. And so this has followed her. It has marred her. I think in so many ways it has blocked her ascendancy, perhaps in many instances, even though she has been Secretary of State. She was obviously a Senate and a Democratic nominee, but yeah, she has had to spend her entire life sort of explaining some of Bill Clinton's failings, which have been many, particularly when it comes to his relationship with women. And here she is having to do that again. And listen, I think it's her power and her intellect and her prestige that makes her an even bigger target for Republicans. She's powerful, she's smart, she bests them, in any of these hearings.
Remember the 11-hour
Yes,
Benghazi,
the Benghazi,
yes,
where I think she literally brushed off her shoulders. And listen, and that's why she wanted this public. And that's probably in many ways why they didn't want it public, because it would point to how ridiculous this is.
There's Benghazi right there. I mean, the hand gestures, more than what she said, her body language, remember at the time, was sort of key in classic. And, she's a woman, she's a preparer, and I'm told that she definitely has been, preparing for what she's doing as we speak behind closed doors.
So this raises an interesting question, and opinions may vary on whether Hillary Clinton should have had to sit for the 6-hour deposition at all, or if that's a form of wasting time that could have been spent going after more accused co-conspirators and perpetrators of sexual violence within the Epstein files. I think regardless of the necessity of interviewing Hillary Clinton specifically, what's clear through the way that Republicans have handled all of this is that they are using the Epstein case as a pretense to attack their political opponents and further attempt to undermine the Democratic Party, which is incredibly corrupt in nature, not to mention horrifically insulting and in opposition to justice for the American constituents who they have been elected to serve. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what Hillary Clinton says and does during her deposition, because this was an attempt to smear her, regardless of the truth. And what happens with Bill Clinton will be very interesting to see. Will he actually be held accountable, or will this again just be, as one Democrat put it, a clown show staged by Republicans to avoid having to confront the truth? And in regards to the Epstein case, all we've seen so far is deflection, distraction, and inaction from the Republicans.